What's going on YouTube? I hope you're well. Welcome to the channel. This is something new I'm going to be doing, basically going to be doing every week, a longer form Q&A. I'll basically take questions from like my Instagram and we'll in a longer form, and I'll put timestamps below in the description if you don't want to watch the whole thing, even though I'd really like you to watch the whole thing and whatnot. So I am finishing a bag of Quest chips. You know, it's funny, Quest just sent me this massive goodie box. It's under the desk right now, but like Quest bars are fine. They're not like my favorite, but they're pretty good. The thing that I love, like one of my favorite things about Quest is their chips. And they're not paying me to say this, but I'm just saying for those of you who like to snack and you like to smash whole bags of chips, Quest chips are freaking great because you can eat this whole bag for like 140 calories and like 20 grams of protein, 19 grams of protein. So let's set this to the side and get into this. El Durati XYZ asks, I've been really into eating carbs in my deficit. Will it slow down progress? So here's the thing. The answer is blatantly no. It's such an old belief back from like the stone age of bodybuilding back in like the 60s and 70s when Arnold was competing. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that stores fat is eating too many calories. That's literally it. No singular food or food groups stores fat, right? A lot of people like will ask this, they'll say, oh, hey, you know, I'm in my deficit, but I'm eating carbs in my deficit, or I'm having sugar in my deficit, or I'm making cake work in my deficit. Will that slow down progress? But the answer is an absolutely not. Because here's the reality with it, guys, is think about this from the long term, right? Like hypothetically, let's say it did. Let's like hypothetically say that it slowed down progress. You still made progress, it was just slower. Wouldn't that be worth it though? Think about it, like you could either get results really fast by getting rid of all your favorite foods, not having carbs, doing all this crazy stuff, but then you know you'd eventually quit and rebound and gain your weight back. Or let's just hypothetically say it did slow it down, but you still made progress, but it was like you didn't suffer the whole time. I would take, if it was me, I would take slow progress with carbs over fast progress, and I hate everything about it without carbs or without my favorite foods. That's why when it comes to this game, this is so much less than right now. When me and my team coach people, we have what's called our coaching core values, and it's basically this list of core values that's like our compass, our true north, so to speak, and one of those is we make all decisions from the end. Like with this question right here, is can you go the rest of your fat loss journey without eating carbs? Could you lose all the weight without eating carbs and be okay and never have them ever again? If the answer is no, then we have to change this. Does that make sense? Do you see where I'm going at with this? Where it doesn't matter even if it did slow it down, because if that's what's sustainable for you, run with it. Who cares? Here, let's put it this way. When you're 90, you're not gonna care whether it took you 6 months or 12 months to reach your goal. Now, what you will care about is being 90 and not struggling back and forth till you were 90. You see the difference? Now, that's I painted that picture like that as if eating carbs would slow down the progress, but the thing is they don't. Keep that in mind. Eating carbs in your deficit, long story short, does not slow it down. But the reason I went on a rant with it is even if it did, you should be okay with that. You want to have it to where it's not that big of a deal. Next question is by YaC6895. How to lose weight without counting calories. Now here's the thing. Can you lose weight without counting calories? Absolutely. The thing is though, that's like saying, how do I save money without budgeting? Whereas it's like, can you do that if you put some systems in place? Absolutely. It's just, it could be a little bit harder. And it's a little bit, there's a little bit more unknowns. At the end of the day, to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. That's whether you're counting or not. So do you have to count? Absolutely not. The thing with counting though is it just brings everything to the surface and instantly gives you awareness of where things are at right now. You see the difference? So how to lose weight without counting calories. Because here's what you have to understand from the calorie counting route. If you are aware that, let's say you're eating 3,000 calories a day and you go, oh, I eat way too much. I'm gonna cut that back to 2,500. Then you look at your day and you're like, what can I eat that makes me within my 2,500, the deficit? The thing is without counting, it's like, I don't know how much I eat. So what changes do I need to make to cut calories somewhere? You see the difference? So what I would do, this is how I coach. If I'm coaching someone that is wanting to lose weight, but they don't want to count calories or it's not a good place right now. We need to look at what your day looks like as a whole and see where the holes are. Like as in, do you skip breakfast? Do you have a small lunch? Do you have a massive dinner? Do you have 5 bowls of cereal before you go to bed? Like, what's your day-to-day look like? Because here's what I would do. Even if you don't do this like long-term, I would do this for at least a week. If you're not gonna count calories, I would still journal your food for at least a week. You realize just the act of journaling your food, I'm talking about like in a notebook. I'm talking about like get a notebook or the notepad on your phone and literally breakfast, 3 eggs and oatmeal. Lunch, Arby's sandwich. Dinner, whatever. Coffee with 5 creamers. Whatever, 5 bowls of cereal before I go to bed. Whatever it is. But just the act of journaling and writing down what you're eating, you'll instantly make better decisions. Even if there's not a number correlated with it. So that's the first thing I would do. I would start at least for a short period of time, a week, a month, whatever, start journaling your food because you're gonna be like, oh, I had no idea. I ate so much right before I go to bed. Not that eating late at night stores fat, but 3,000 calories of anything right before you go to bed probably isn't the best idea from like a caloric standpoint. So here's the thing, when we write it down, we're accountable for it. Too often, like when we mindlessly eat or we do things and not know about it, because ignorance is bliss, if we don't know, we're not held accountable. You know, like if you get pulled over for speeding, you go, officer, I didn't know I was speeding, we're hoping because we didn't know we're not held liable for our actions. So if you're like, I'm gonna write down everything I eat for the next month, for the next 3 weeks, you're gonna become aware of like, oh, yeah, when I eat pizza, I go way too hard on pizza. Or wow, I don't eat anything hardly at all till about 3 o'clock. And then as soon as I get home from work, I just gorge on pantry food. Like what it's doing, we're still bringing awareness, right? That's what calorie tracking does, is you're aware of how many calories you're eating. But if you're not gonna count calories, we still need to bring awareness to where the issues are at. Because again, we can't escape a jail we don't know we're trapped in. So if you don't know where the problem is at, how do you fix it? Because we could put random guidelines in place like protein in every meal, plants in every meal, no 2 fun food meals in a row, whatever, and that stuff's fine and that works for a lot of people. But I would, before doing all that, still become aware of like what your habits are. Because if you don't know, you can't fix it. So a few of those strategies you could do is no matter what, every time you eat has to have a protein and a plant. Double up on your protein and plants. That's something I teach clients a lot, is if we're doing this without counting calories, I will have them double up on protein and plants. Because that does 2 things. Number 1, it gives you fiber and protein, which help with fat loss a lot. But then also, those are lower calorically, generally speaking. So if you eat, let's say you want a pasta meal. Let's say you're gonna make lunch and you're like, I just want pasta. And it's easy to smash like 700 calories of pasta. But if you say, oh, I have to double up on protein and plants, so you're like a big chicken breast and a salad, guess what? Now you're not nearly as hungry for the stuff that's easy to overeat, like pasta or cake or cookies or whatever. See the difference? Whereas we're being very strategic about it. Comparing it to money, like if you were to say, hey Jared, how do I save money without budgeting? It would be a matter of setting a system in place. Like let's say every paycheck, you automatically take 20% and throw it in a savings account. Like you're not budgeting, but before you even see that money, you throw it into half of it or a quarter of it into the savings account. Half of you guys do this with like your work has like a 401k or retirement plan where like there's part of your income you never even see, and they throw 10% of it or X much a month in your 401k, right? You're not budgeting that, but you don't even see it. So you could take the same type of philosophy to this, whereas it's like no matter what I eat, if it's a protein in a plant, I'm gonna double it. And if it's anything that's not a protein in a plant, I'm gonna cut it in half. So if you normally have 2 pieces of cake, that's 1. If you normally have a bottle of wine, that's half. If you normally have a thing of pasta this big, you're gonna have a thing of pasta this big. If you normally go out to eat and get a large McDonald's #1, get a small McDonald's #1. See the difference? It's setting rules and guidelines into that. And the one I just gave you is one that I teach a lot, is double up on protein and plants. But then anything that's not a protein in a plant, don't get rid of it. That's not a good idea, because then you'll binge on it later, is just dial the portion down a little bit, 25 to 50%. Okay, Coastal Dream 120 says, any tips to stay on track? So here's the issue. A lot of people just have issues just staying on, like this person's saying, is staying on track. Whereas it doesn't matter what they're doing, just being on track is an issue. So there's a few things you can do. Number one, most people who struggle staying on track, their program's like working against them. Do you see what I mean? Where like, so for example, if you told me, Jared, I want you to eat keto, 1,200 calories, strength train 7 days a week, cardio 7 days a week, go do a CrossFit class, and eat in a fasting window while checking ketone levels, while eating only vegan-friendly food, and going on a walk every day, first thing in the morning fasted, and taking these 7 supplements. I would have massive issues staying on track. See what I'm saying? But if you said, Jared, strength train 3 days a week, eat this many calories a day. That alone is gonna be 10 times easier to keep on track with. So understand this, if you're struggling staying on track, I want you to audit your program, right? This is why half the reason people apply for coaching and get help is so they don't have to do the thinking on this stuff. Because most people, again, like most people who apply for coaching with me and my team, I look at what they were doing and it's like so freaking complicated, it's not even funny. It's literally like the example I just gave. They're like eating every 2.5 hours with these carb to fat ratios and their calorie cycling, and within the calorie cycling there's carb cycling, and taking these supplements at different times a day, and going to a CrossFit class, and doing Zumba, and doing fasted cardio first thing in the morning, and doing late night strength training, and see what I'm saying? So half the time where it's a staying on track issue, it's with a complex program. One of the things that I tell people as soon as they get into coaching with me is like, it's literally on my coaching page, is everyone needs simplicity and certainty, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have what's simple and actionable and doable, it doesn't matter anything else because you're gonna quit. So half the struggles people have with staying on track is because their program is just too fucking complicated. And, or not just not complicated, it doesn't fit their life. The amount of people who tell me and say something like, oh, I struggle with my nutrition. I eat every 3 hours, but they're never hungry. Well, that right there, butt heads. Or if someone's like, oh, I hate doing morning workouts, but they get up before whatever and do their workouts in the morning when they could just do them after work, right? Or someone who says, oh, I love carbs, they do keto, right? What you're doing has to fit your life seamlessly. You see what I mean? Whereas if it doesn't, that goes back to you're just working against yourself. You see the difference? Versus imagine if what you're doing was simple, arguably easy, not obviously completely easy because well, fat loss isn't, but it's so simple, it's not that big of a deal to do, and it works seamlessly with your life, your eating schedule, your family, your kids, your life, your work, it just works. Because if you think about how your whole house is set up, it's for convenience on your life. Right? When you get up, the job you have, when you go to work, when you pick the kids up, who's picking the kids up, the way your evening looks, it's all because it's what's convenient for your life. And we have to adopt the same stuff with fat loss and fitness and inner work and all this you game. So that's half of the staying on track game, is just making sure what you're doing isn't that big of a deal to do. Because then your biggest obstacle becomes what's easy to do is just easier not to do. It's like making your bed. No, making your bed's not hard. It's just easier not to do it, which for a lot of people makes it hard. So the other piece to staying on track is look at smaller tasks, right? Look at what you're doing outside of fitness and fat loss. Another one of my core values when it comes to coaching is raise your life's standard. Because how you do anything is very much how you do everything. If you'll shortcut over here, you're probably gonna shortcut over here. So if you have habits, if you struggle with staying on track with your nutrition or workouts or what have you, but you also probably have some small habits that are going by the wayside. Like you might have dishes in your sink every night. You might not change the toilet paper roll. You might just sit it on top. You might not make your bed. You might leave the house a wreck. You might keep your car dirty all the time. Whatever it is, but that's generally what part of the issue is. If you're gonna slack in the small, you're probably gonna slack in the big. So if you're having trouble with discipline and staying on track on the big stuff, audit your small stuff. Fix the small stuff and it scales to the big stuff. Laura Jade asks, strategies to avoid emotional eating. This is one of my favorites. Here's what you have to understand with emotional eating. First of all, this is a big topic and they can be very multifaceted. The thing is with emotional eating is you have to separate the emotions from food, okay? When most people overeat, it's because they are trying to not feel the emotion. I'm sad, where's the chips? I'm upset, I had a bad day. I'm just gonna go binge on ice cream all night. My boyfriend broke up with me. my girlfriend broke up with me, my boss yelled at me, my dog died, whatever it is, whatever event happened that causes you to be flooded with a negative emotion. And that's when people go food, because it's a coping mechanism, right? Either it makes going nuts on food is basically distracts you. It can make, in some cases, a lot of people feel grounded with food. Like that may have been a habit when you were a little kid. So now you're an adult, your inner child's like, I'm upset, I want food. And then you get food and you have temporary relief. Disclaimer, I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist or anything like that. I'm just speaking from my own experience. But if this is something you struggle with a lot, I would highly suggest working with a professional like a counselor or a therapist, someone who specializes in this. But I'm just speaking from my own experience. At the end of the day, you just have to handle the emotions separately from food, because emotionally eating not only doesn't fix the problem, it makes it worse. Like for example, let's say you had a bad day at work and you're really upset. So you come home and want to binge on food and go emotionally eat with food. Well, the issue is the problem didn't get solved. If you got yelled at work and you come home and emotionally eat because you're upset, well, it didn't undo the things that person said. It doesn't fix the hurt emotions. When we emotionally eat, we're trying to not feel the emotions. But the issue is trying to distract from feeling the emotions is similar to like the feeling of having to take a shit and you're like, no, I don't want to feel this, and you distract yourself. Well, distracting yourself when you have the feeling of having to take a shit, it doesn't fix the fact that you need to poop, right? This is a fucked up example, but it's very similar. Emotions are meant to be felt, right? Even the negative ones. If you numb yourself to the bad emotions, you'll numb yourself eventually to the good emotions, right? And then people do crazy stuff just to feel. You see what I'm saying? So imagine if every time you had to go to the bathroom, you distracted yourself with food, with work, with stress, with whatever, you would eventually, it doesn't get rid of the fact that you need to poop. And that's where the issue comes in. So what happens if you go days without pooping? You can literally get sick, you could potentially die, you'll just explode everywhere, it's disgusting, the whole 9 yards. So this is what happens when people emotionally eat. You're sad and you're trying to not feel the sad. You're trying to cover it, distract from it. Well, you need to emotionally take a shit. So you need to, instead of covering it with work, with food, with whatever you're emotionally doing, right? A lot of people have a bad day, then they emotionally clean their house because they're trying to avoid feeling. So a lot of people get emotional, they drink, they do drugs, they eat. What I used to do is I would get emotional about stuff and I would be emotionally ambitious. I would go create content, I would go work, I would go do emails, I would do client stuff. But it still caused the same issue, is the emotion wasn't being seen or felt. So if you struggle with emotional eating, you need to separate yourself from food, because not only, like I said, does it not fix the problem, it makes it worse, because that inner child, that inner emotion of yours isn't being seen or heard. But then also, after it's over, you're like, oh my gosh, I literally just ate like 3,000 calories in ice cream. Now my fat loss is ruined, and I just threw myself off the wagon, and now you're in a worse emotional state. So when you have the urge to emotionally eat, first of all, don't judge yourself. If you're trying to like Laura Jade asked strategies to avoid it. So here's the thing. Understand, if you do it, forgive yourself. Don't judge that. It's okay. That was a coping mechanism you're now working through, okay? Forgive yourself what you did in survival mode, so to speak. Now, in order to avoid doing it again, is you have to realize now you have to handle the emotion separately from food, okay? So if you're using food to avoid the emotion, you need to welcome the emotion. So if you have that same bad day, you're emotional and you're like, I gotta go get food, you have to stop that desire. Or you're gonna have to realize that desire is gonna be there, and you have to gonna go, no, we're gonna sit with this. So this is where you could literally just go like sit and be with your sad, your anxious, your whatever it is, the negative emotion, just be with it. Pull it up a chair. Be like, it's okay for you to feel like this in my body, like, let's be with it. Because at the end of the day, it's just asking you to see it, right? If all of a sudden you look out your door and the little neighborhood kid across the street sees his dog get hit by a car, and he's all sad, you're not gonna run ice cream out to him and say, here, act like it didn't happen. You would never do that to a kid, but you're doing that to yourself. This is why one of my favorite things to do is sit with it or journal about it. Here's the cool thing with journaling, guys, is when you are feeling emotional and you wanna do anything but sit with it, bust open a journal and write about it. Because when you're writing about it, you feel really productive and you feel like you're avoiding it. But you're writing about it. It's almost like work. It's like talking to a therapist sometimes, where it's like you're just getting it out, right? That's why I'm all about therapy. I'm in therapy right now, but you need to hold space for these emotions and not try to cover them up. So that's kind of the long story short. Moving right along. Gimme Free Chide asks how to motivate myself for strength training. Here's what you have to understand, whether it's strength training, whether it's dieting, whether it's whatever you want to do, at the end of the day, if you're relying on motivation, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if you and I both know motivation doesn't last. Motivation's like that friend that you love, but you can't rely on. You know, it's like you love them to pieces, you're there for them, but you know you can't rely on them. If they say they'll be at your house at 9 o'clock, they're either not gonna show up or they'll be there at 10:30. That's motivation. Appreciate it when it's here, but don't base your success on it. This is where you need to base your success in discipline, not motivation, okay? Motivation, what's funny is motivation, the actual dictionary definition of motivation doesn't have anything to do with a feeling. Motivation is simply having a reason to do something, according to the definition. And think of it this way. Think about all the stuff that you do when you're not motivated to. How many times are you not motivated to go to work, but you do anyway because you'll go broke? Why do you pay your bills when you're not motivated? It's because you know lights will get turned off, water gets turned off, you're not gonna eat. Why do you do all the household responsibilities when you're not motivated to? Because your household will fall apart. It's the same thing. Because when you, all these other things like work, your bills, your responsibilities, parenting, being a spouse, whatever, when you're not motivated, you think about what happens if you don't, right? You just look at the pain. Why do you show up to work when you aren't motivated? Because you immediately go, pain. I will literally lose my house, I'll go broke. Why do you pay your bills when you aren't motivated to? It's because you know lights will get turned off. And you say, oh, that pain is worse than the pain that's showing up to work. This is the same thing. When you're not motivated to strength train, to do your workout, to do your inner work, whatever it is you're not motivated to do, too often it's because you're fixating on the pain of it versus the pain of not doing it. I can't remember who said it, but it's a great quote that goes, when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of change, that's when true change will happen. So it's the same thing, is when you're not motivated, you need to, first of all, think about, well, what happens if I don't do this? And which is more painful? For most people, the pain of doing it is worse than the pain of staying the same. So then that's why someone doesn't change. This is why you have to do everything you can and root it in discipline. Show up for yourself when you don't want to. Be consistent when you don't want to. It's like a dog that you went and got from the pound that's never been taught to sit. You gotta train it to sit, and you know there's gonna be resistance. So when you're changing these habits, you have to know it's like a dog that's never been taught to sit. There's gonna be resistance. But through showing up anyway, over and over and over again, your inner dog is gonna learn to sit. All right, let's do one more. Any ideas on how to improve the perception of your own body? So here's the thing. Body dysmorphia is a real thing. Like, a lot of people struggle with just hating everything about their appearance. But here's what you have to understand. First of all, if you struggle with that, therapy, right? Any of these very inner issues that you're struggling with, therapy is amazing, okay? But here's the thing you have to understand on when you said ideas on how to improve the perception of your own body. You have to understand this. You have to start taking inventory over what you like. I've said that to people before and they're like, oh yeah, there's not a single thing. And I'm like, and I'll go through stuff that doesn't have to do with appearance. I said, what about the heart that beats inside you when you never told it to? What about the lungs that are keeping you alive right now that you forgot about? What about your sense of balance that people that are 80 would die to have? What about the fact that you have 2 thumbs and you couldn't open a doorknob or you couldn't text? You have to understand, you have to start taking inventory over all of these great things and become grateful for them. Because think about it, it's like a little kid, right? If you have a little kid that's not grateful for they have a whole toy box full of toys, and they're ungrateful for all of them. They're ungrateful for everything. As their parent, do you want to go get them the newest toy? Probably not, because you know they're gonna be ungrateful for it as well. But what happens when someone's grateful as fuck for, like a little kid's grateful as fuck for all of his toys and everything? Like, he finds a stick and he's like, oh my gosh, mom, thank you for this stick. You naturally want to give him more. Well, if you have all this stuff going for you, but you've trained yourself to be ungrateful for all of it and you hate all of it, you could have literally the best thing ever to happen to you and you would still treat it the same way. This is why you have to reprogram your brain to be in a state of gratitude about yourself, your body, your appearance, everything, right? Which this takes time. This is a relationship issue from you to you. So for the question, any ideas on how to improve the perception of your own body is, first of all, work on it, right? It's like, if I don't like my hairstyle, I can cut it and change it. You see what I mean? The cool thing with your body is you can change it. You can start exercising, you can start eating better, you can do all this stuff and it will get better. But you also need, about your body specifically, you need to start taking inventory over all the stuff that you do like about it, even if it's not appearance-based. The fact that you have skin that doesn't hurt when you press it. The fact that you have hair on your arms so you know when a spider's on it. The fact that both of your eyes probably work. The fact that you have a consciousness that is listening to what I'm saying and your brain is processing it and trying to pull the value out of it. You have a lot more going for you than you think. But too often people don't even look at that. And it's the equivalent to me loving my house but not liking the color of my bathroom and me going, oh, burn my whole fucking house to the ground because I hate the color of my bathroom. Where it's like, no, the rest of my house is dope, right? I like this room, I like my living room, I love my bedroom. It keeps me safe from the weather. Like, you have a lot more going for you than you think. So start taking inventory of it, then all of a sudden, those habits will carry over to other things like your appearance and whatnot. All right, guys, we're gonna call it there on today's video. I don't wanna make this too obscenely long, even though this is gonna be a longer form video. If you need anything, let me know. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments section down below. If there's any questions that you have that I did not answer, that you would either like to hear my thoughts on, or maybe like to have me featured in another video, throw them in the comment section. I wanna know what you struggle with. I wanna know what you have a hard time with and how I can help. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell on my channel. That way you're made aware whenever something comes up, whenever a new video comes out. Also, check out some of the stuff I've got for you in the description, whether you wanna look into potentially coaching with me or my team, whether you want, I have a bunch of free resources down there, like my podcast, my fat loss checklist, which is this big, beautiful, free 5-day course I have. I got a lot of stuff going on, so check that out. But otherwise, yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I'll talk to you next time.